to the point where I have no memory of what I did. It included me dancing, using a tarpaulin as a pole. I also tried to fisticuff, a.k.a. fight one of my friends, and I passed out in the middle of the dance floor and had to be carried into a little teepee.
Yo, last night was f***ing crazy.
Oi, I have so much to tell you guys.
Come over right now for a debrief.
It's time for a debrief with Clara, Ella and Jade.
Hello everybody and welcome to the third episode of Debrief. I'm Clara.
I'm Jade.
And I'm Ella.
And today we're going to be covering drinking culture in New Zealand, drink spiking and hangxiety, which are all topics dear to our hearts.
I just feel like I know that we all have our own topic, but the way you went drink spiking as if like it's something to do with me.
Yeah, drink spiking Jade.
And
well, let's kick it off then. Drinking culture in New Zealand is super prevalent. We've all had experiences going out on the toon, maybe a little too young at times. I could say for myself, I started drinking at the age of 14 and I was a chronic binge drinker, which isn't too surprising.
I think, classic Kiwi girl. I think another thing is like I'm from a really small town and that is like, I mean, what else is there to do except drink and get a bit silly? So again, started really young. I mean, my parents taught me, my dad was big on like, you don't need alcohol to have fun. So I wasn't like as crazy when I was younger, but like, I mean, I was surrounded by it and it was what we would do every single weekend was drink.
And I think it is something you are surrounded by. Like I had older brothers growing up, so they would have all their friends around to the house drinking, playing drinking games. Like I was joining in on their drinking games. I was playing with Sprite, of course, when I was like a very young child. So it was always like a big thing. I feel like in New Zealand drinking was all around you.
Yeah. And this is highlighted especially in New Zealand statistics for drinking. Over 80% of New Zealanders drink on a regular basis, which I guess is highlighted as well because I feel like when I go out sober or when I make an effort to go out sober, you just get pounded. Yeah. Like, why are you not drinking? Yeah. Have a drink. Why can't you drink? I can get you an Uber home. Like, it's always such a big deal. And that is, I mean, kind of disappointing in a way because you feel like you have to drink now to go out in order to not feel uncomfortable.
And to be considered like fun.
Yes, yeah. 100%.
Even I was saying the other day, like if I'm like cutting or something, I'll stop drinking and I end up just not going out. Or like my dad stopped drinking like 20 years ago. He was a massive drinker and then one day he just decided like I don't need alcohol, and he said he lost friends, he stopped being invited to things because they like, or after work drinks they'd be like, oh, we just assumed you wouldn't want to come. And it's like I can still come and have fun. I just don't need to like get blinded every time. So,
and we can't help it as well because according to statistics we are also really shocking with risky drinking. 1 in 10 New Zealanders are hazardous drinkers, which means you essentially, when you drink alcohol, you put yourself in very dangerous and bad situations. I feel like as women as well, we also have to be extra cautious. We can't really afford to get blind drunk in random places.
Especially
and then
in town and stuff.
Oh like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like it's just a lot scarier, but I do know for men as well, they are also at risk of being hazardous drinkers, which involves just doing very, very stupid things.
And I feel like guys have more of a pressure to get or drink more because there's that whole thing of being a lightweight, you know? And it's like, being a lightweight is amazing.
I love being a lightweight. Like getting drunk off 4 drinks. I'm saving so much money.
Getting a bit tipsy off a couple.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm on such a good vibe right now where there's people who have to like punch back 2 boxes and they're like still like, where's more? It's like, you've spent like $80.
With guys, so it's so like obvious it's just toxic masculinity. Like if you can drink a lot, then you're like a real man.
Cool.
Yeah, you're cool.
And it's so ingrained in our culture that we have to be good drinkers. We have to go hard or you kind
as
of
a
have
Kiwi.
to go home. As a Kiwi, yeah.
Or even when I was traveling, like I was 18 and where was I? I was in Germany, Frankfurt, big drinkers, but they would hear that we were Kiwis and they would ask to drink with us and go out with us. They would come over and be like, can we drink? Everywhere we went, they'd be like, oh my God, Kiwis, let's get on the piss. And we'd be like, okay, like, but like it was like a thing of like, you're a Kiwi, you sink piss. Like,
Yes, absolutely. And you do it well. You do it with pride. I've read on Reddit as well, a girl got a college scholarship in America And she said she was horrified at how much she could put away compared to American teenagers. Like, it's just with so much ease. And that's because it's ingrained and kind of pressured into us. I also kind of felt at high school, if you didn't drink, you weren't seen as cool and social.
Yep.
And you weren't up with it. And I think as well with parties, we all started going to parties. Well, a lot of us started going to parties so young. And we were not taught how to drink safely. I know in France, most families will begin, teaching their children alcohol use at the age of 12. So you'd have a glass of wine with dinner. And if you wanted to teach them their limits, you'd be like, it's in a controlled environment. Whereas I feel like we would just kind of let loose into dangerous environments, and it was like, oh, let's just see how much you can drink before you're legless.
Because a lot of the time you're hiding it from your parents at that age.
Yeah.
Like, my parents didn't know I was drinking at the age I was, and I think because it's like so secretive, that is why you are unsafe with it. And if you're telling your parents, and at least they can, tell you how to drink safely, but it doesn't really happen.
And I was hospitalized at the age of 14 for drinking too much. I passed out essentially after drinking half a bottle of Canadian Club because I didn't realize that straights have that sort of effect
power.
on you. Yeah. So I
Power.
just kept drinking. Nothing was happening. And I was like, this is so weird. Like, why is it not happening? But now as I know, straights take a little bit longer
they
to
catch
kick
up
in.
with you.
They catch in. So I had to go and be put on a charcoal drip. Would never do it again. But unfortunately, I still struggled to learn my limits even after that.
I was about to say, it is like finding your limits is such a hard thing. And I feel like some people, like I was having a conversation on the weekend and this guy was like, I don't know I had my last drink until it's too late and I've had it. And I think it's because that is that delay, and people say like, have a drink, then have a water, then have another drink. But when you're out, are you like, normally the water jug at the club is like a bit dusty, crusty.
Yeah.
The cups aren't clean and you're like, am I really going to go find a glass? Like, unless I've been boogieing and I need a bit of hydration, I'm probably going to head to the bar and
If
get
I've got a
drink.
sweat on, I
If
will be
you've got
getting
a
that
wee-
water.
If you got just a little bit of trickle.
Yeah, got a bit too keen on the dance floor, then maybe I'll get some water. But apart from that, I'm avoiding it. I'm just getting another drink.
Yeah, and we're not really encouraged to by our mates to have a glass of water unless you're at the point where you've passed out or
Yeah.
you're being sick.
Then suddenly
Everyone's
it's
like, have a
"Do you want
water."
water? Do you want a piece of bread? Like, it's like, mate, it's too late. I'm in the garden. My head's in the bush. Like, we've gone too far.
I feel terrible. And it's terrible as well because in New Zealand, the average age we start binge drinking is 13.2 years, which is shocking. I looked at the UK as well. The UK is 14.2 years, which
It's so young, man.
know,
Your
it's
brain hasn't even
terrible.
like developed.
I know. And we're not taught. Apparently in Australia, which I wonder if they've like shifted the statistics a bit to seem better than us. Allegedly, it's like 16.
I doubt
I
it.
don't know about
I
that.
doubt
I'm
it.
unsure. In America, it's around 15, which is fascinating as well because their drinking age is 21.
Yeah.
Do you think, well, clearly their drinking age makes a bit of a difference, but I guess they have different drinking cultures as well. But like, do you think that because their drinking age is higher, that actually stops people?
Maybe it delays when you start drinking. Like,
So like 15 for them is really young because their
Yeah.
drinking age is 21, where ours is
Ours is 18.
and also like a lot of people, when you got, like, I'm assuming you guys got fake IDs, like what age are you, like 17, 16, 17?
Yep.
You could pass as an 18-year-old sometimes, but you're not passing as a 21-year-old, you know? Like,
No,
that's
that's true.
hard.
Yeah.
I actually never had a fake ID because I was born in 2000 and trying to scratch 2000 into 1999.
Yeah, that's
it's
impossible.
Not happening, I'll be honest with you. And I couldn't really find anyone that looked like me.
You're just one of a kind.
So unique.
So
You're
unique.
just
But then
incredibly
again,
unique.
small town, we weren't really going to the city much. Like, we went to town when we got older, but it was just house parties at random houses where the parents were out and everyone would smash the house up. And
Yes,
Well,
and that was a
crazy.
huge issue as well.
Yeah.
Just house parties, and it would all most of the time there'd be no parents there, so it was just kind of free, just
Or-
going nuts.
the dodgy parents that just like let it happen.
Yeah, they loved
Turn
it.
the blind eye. Like,
Oh,
they're inside.
they're
getting
drinking with
smashed
you,
as
they're
well.
encouraging it, yeah.
And you go inside and you're like, ugh. And they're like,
Although,
"How you
yeah,
going?"
that was kind of a positive though in the situations because even though the parents were dodgy, at least if stuff that was bad was going on, it could be
Like, give
kind
you a
of,
rock.
yeah, it kind of negated a bit, and at least it was like a helping hand. But it's just so ingrained in Kiwis that we have to be good at drinking, we have to go out, we have to be social, otherwise it becomes socially unacceptable. You've got to be sober. You can't be sober.
You can't be sober. Are you guys good at going out now without drinking, or do you still find there's a pressure?
There's definitely a pressure, I feel like, because I'm in like 21st season, right? And if you're going sober, then people are like, just have a couple. Like, what do you mean?
It's the only conversation you have if you go sober. It's like, why?
I also like kind of find it really punishing being the only sober person there, having those dry chats with drunk people. And if you were drunk too, you'd be like loving it. Yeah. But being sober, you're kind of like, oh yeah.
And you go, is that what I look like?
Yeah.
But do you know what though? Another great part about being sober is you witness everything and you know exactly what's going on. You know what the dynamics are, the vibes are. And I've actually really enjoyed it, especially getting older, being sober. And there's been so many situations where I've needed to help people, which I've loved being able to do in a conscious state. And
you do feel like a bit of a hero. You get them the water, you get them the bread.
Exactly.
You rub them back while they vomit.
Exactly. But another reason why I guess going out in New Zealand can be stressful, especially in bars situations as well, is the risk of drink spiking, which has massively come to light due to the Mama Hooch incident.
Yeah, and I'll dive into that a bit later with trying to find statistics online to do with drink spiking. But I thought we'd start off with some of the signs that you've been spiked. Feeling dizzy, passing out, memory loss, feeling faint, all those kind of things where, especially if you've only had a few drinks, and I feel like to a certain degree you do know your limits, even if you don't quite know your limits. You know when something's off. So rather than like waiting and being like, because I feel like when I'm starting to feel like a bit whoa, I'm like, okay, I'll wait it out and I'll see what's happening. But find your mates, call your parents, call the police if you're really concerned, because drink spiking, as I've found, is really hard to get people caught. And you find that especially if you've been on drugs that night, which I mean realistically is a huge thing in New Zealand, and it's just part of life, MDMA and all that. If you go to the police and you say that you think you've been spiked, if you've been on any other drugs that night, they pretty much just have to be like, well,
yeah, how do you know it wasn't the bad gear or something?
But drink spiking's a scary thing, because with the whole not knowing your limits, I went to Tomorrowland when I was 18, which is like this festival overseas, and I lost my mates, and so I thought I'd also lost my phone on the first night, so that's probably not a good teller.
Dusty.
Yeah. Oh no, sorry, I did have my phone. I lost my phone this night. So I was on the Red Bull vodkas. Nice. Obviously there's not many limits. I would buy a few shots and then one Red Bull, and then just like, yeah. So I was getting a bit crazy, and I had lost my friend, so I mean, bit risky. I met this like really cool group of guys, and we were all hanging out. We were having the best time, and the last thing I remember was putting my drink down on the ground. No idea why. I just remember putting it down, and there was like the group of us standing there, and then we did something, and the next minute I was lying down on the hill on the main stage. I have a very faint flashback of being in the crowd of the main stage, which makes this whole thing like kind of hard to avoid. Like, did I just get myself that drunk, or was I spiked? Because it happened like suddenly I was there and suddenly I wasn't, and I was getting woken up by a paramedic who put me on a stretcher, and I was very confused. I got put in an ambulance. There was a girl who didn't speak English trying to pull out an IV line, and I was trying to be like, don't do that, like, and they drove me to the medic tent, and I kept falling asleep and waking up, and then they took me to like a different medic tent, and it was just like really, I had no idea what was going on. And in the end, they gave me a foil blanket, and they pointed and said, your tent's that way, like, good luck. And I wandered, because Tomorrowland's huge. It takes you 40 minutes to walk from the campsite to the festival within the festival grounds. And I walked around for, I think, 2.5 hours just trying to find my tent. I finally got back, went to sleep. The boys were asleep. And I woke up, and the boys were like, why do you have a tinfoil blanket? And I had like no memory of the night before, and my phone was gone, and we ended up tracking it on my iPhone to somewhere in Berlin, like after the festival. So I don't like, I have,
that's so scary,
isn't
man.
it? Like, and in the moment I was not stressed about it. Like I was like, oh, my phone will get handed in, and then by the time the festival was over and I didn't have my phone, I kind of was like, oh, like whatever. But now I look back and I'm like, did I get spiked? And I feel like a lot of people have that where maybe they've been spiked and they've like escaped it, especially like being around friends and they can get you out of there, especially with the drinking culture in New Zealand. They probably think you're just really drunk and they'll get you home. And that thing of being like, did I get spiked? Like, do you have any friends that have been through it or?
Yeah, I think it's important as well when you're out with your girlfriends to kind of be really conscious of your surroundings. I remember I went to a bar for one of my friend's 21st birthdays, and I was sitting there having a conversation with one of my friends, and I didn't realize, but there was a man who was sitting across from me, and he kept allegedly staring at me and then staring at my drink and then staring at me and then was just sitting there staring at me. He wasn't doing anything. And luckily I had two of my friends sitting on the other side kind of watching him. And after a while they got really freaked out and they straight up would just like to him like, look, what do you want with her? Why do you keep staring at her? Like, can you go away? This is just
Creepy.
uncomfortable. And then now in hindsight, he probably very well was trying to look for an opportunity.
He's
to
waiting
just,
for his moment.
just drop one in there.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to do. It just takes
Exactly.
one moment of just not looking at your drink for someone to just stare
And
it up.
before I dive into an article that I was reading today, I just want to quickly say, Clara asked me to talk about some of the drugs used to spike drinks, and I'm thinking, I'm actually not going to do that, Clara. I'm not going to hand out the
Yeah,
information.
you don't want to hand out that information, Clara. Also, how bad would it look if people see Jade's
me?
search history?
Well, look,
Yeah.
we've all seen The Hangover. We know
Yeah.
that roofies or roofalin is a big one because
Yeah.
it makes you forget literally every single thing that's
But
happened.
people even just use like more alcohol or just drugs that they have on them and
Yeah.
just putting it in their drink to get them over the line so that like especially like guys with girls or the other way as well, like just getting them just that little bit more easy to convince. But I was reading an article done by News Hub, and police are pretty much saying it's hard to detect, prosecute, or even track drink spiking in New Zealand. They say at least 12% of patients in the last year have been drug-assisted sexual assaults. But that's the only ones that they can really say that that's how it happened. But it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
They interviewed a guy who had been spiked, and he said he still doesn't know what happened to them the night. He went to the police, who were supportive but said it would be almost impossible to find out. The police's main focus was just that I was safe and I could get through the night, and then they said finding and holding someone accountable was out of the question, which is crazy to think, because then that kind of talks people out of wanting to reach out. But I think that's a big message, is like, if you think you've been spiked, still reach out, because the more information and the more people coming forward, the more they can do about it. But in light of the Mama Hooch trial, News Hub went to the police to obtain figures to try and get a picture of the prevalence of drink spiking in New Zealand. However, an official Information Act request was refused, with police saying it's too hard to distinguish whether drink spiking and then sexual offences occurred. Police could only give figures for disabling, stupefying and poison charges. So that includes like people who are poisoning each other, which is not drink spiking. That's a whole other issue. So it's all mixed into one. They have only had court action for 3 people in 2021, 5 in 2022, and only 2 so far this year.
It's so bad. I guess it's
so fucked up.
I guess it's it's just you gaslight yourself, especially if you've been out drinking. You'd be like, oh, like I just got way too drunk. There'd be so many people who are just like, oh, like I blacked out. It's my fault. I shouldn't have drunk that much,
Yep,
when
you
they've
play
actually
it
been
down.
spiked.
And I think that leans into the drinking culture as well, because like we do have some pretty big nights, and you do wake up the next day and you're like, what happened?
Yeah.
So if you're aware that you know you can get yourself into that state, you kind of think like, oh no, like maybe it was just me getting a bit silly. Or even like, to get real, you get really drunk, you hook up with someone, and you kind of wake up in the morning and you're like, what happened? Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I was so out of it last night. Like, and you hear your mates being like, I don't even know why I slept with that guy. Or like, I don't know why I hooked up with them. I was just really, really drunk. And then you kind of think like, but were you that drunk? Like, you have no idea.
It's scary.
Yeah.
It's,
And
yeah.
I mean, speaking of drinking and waking up the next day, absolutely questioning your entire life, that leans into hangxiety.
It does beautifully. The Sunday scaries. Yeah, so hangxiety is, for those that don't know, it's basically just the mix of a hangover with anxiety the next day. So it's not only like the physical effects of a hangover, headaches, probably vomiting. Yeah, a little vomiting, especially for me. And then, like body pains and stuff, and mixed with the emotional effects of anxiety, like the overthinking and Yeah, so it's basically, it comes because drinking, like, it lifts your dopamine levels, you know, you're feeling good, and then once those dopamine levels start to drop, that's when the anxiety feelings like come in, and it's a recipe for disaster, to be completely honest. And I think we all experience a bit of hangxiety. I experience it every single Sunday, no matter what I've done. Like, even if I know that I'm like, surely I couldn't have done something that bad, I will still
Even
overthink
with
so
your
much.
close mates.
Yep.
Like, I feel like you have such a good night and you have so much fun, and then you wake up the next day and you're like, why did I say that? Why did I do that? Why did I dance like that? Why did I talk to them? Like,
Yeah, it's terrible. I remember I got invited to a wedding as a +1, and it was a hot day. It was a beautiful day. It was 12 o'clock, a lovely day for a wedding. It was stellar. What was even more stellar as well was the open bar that featured unlimited espresso
that's
martinis,
good.
strawberry daiquiris, you know, and I was in heaven.
that's a bougie wedding.
Such a bougie wedding, and there were snacks going around. They were making sure people were eating. Unfortunately, after a few drinks, I'm like,
I'm not hungry.
I don't need food. Long story short, by I'd say about 4 p.m, I was stonkered. I was absolutely inebriated to the point where I have no memory of what I did. It included me dancing, using a tarpaulin as a pole. I also tried to fisticuff, a.k.a. fight one of my friends. And I passed out in the middle of the dance floor and had to be carried into a little teepee where I woke up so confused. And then the next morning, terrible. I was shaking. I was in hysterics. I had to go out for lunch with my friends, and I was sitting there with my arms crossed, crying so bad. And it's just like, why do we do this to ourselves?
Yeah.
Why do we push it
It's
this
like
far?
a next level like state of vulnerability. Like you're in, like, you're already feeling the effects of like just the most awful, you know, hangover, and then plus all the anxious feelings. And like, but the most important thing is like, you are not alone in these feelings. Like, we did a poll on our Instagram, debrief.nz, and it literally 85% of our followers were saying how it is they experience hangxiety. And it's a very common thing that happens in New Zealand and anyone who drinks, you know?
But I feel like when one of my mates gets way too plastered and maybe they make a fool of themselves, I'm like, hey, it's all right. Like, it happens to everyone, and you wake up the next day and you got to like talk them down and be like, look, don't even stress. And I don't judge them for that. I mean, unless you're being like an absolute dick, then like that's a whole other thing. But if you just made a fool of yourself, like, I'm like, look, we all do it. I wouldn't judge them for it. It's something to laugh about in a few weeks. But when it's you, you're like, this is the end of the world.
It's the end of the world.
It's I'm never drinking again.
Yep. The
I am
amount of
never
Sundays
drinking
I have
again.
said I'm not drinking again, and I was like, because my anxiety has been super bad lately, so I've been like, oh, I won't drink again. I'm only going to drink for a special occasion. Well, that went out the window, didn't it?
Yes, it always
You
does.
always forget by the time Saturday rolls around.
It's so interesting as well, because hangxiety, if you're like actually like a really sound person, you don't struggle with mental health issues, it can actually trigger severe anxiety disorders, because your brain chemicals start to go so out of whack that it's very hard for the chemicals in your brain to regulate themselves. So that actually has an effect on you permanently.
That's crazy. And I can feel the effects of anxiety for days after, especially if I've made a dick of myself. I will feel those effects.
Or when you've been really plastered and then you're getting flashbacks through the week.
Oh,
those are the
dreadful.
worst.
Or people start sending photos,
Or
and you're like,
someone-
oh,
yeah.
nice,
Or
thanks.
someone says, it was so funny when you did that, and you're like, I did what? Like,
Like, I remember after my 21st, Jade was like, said she had something to tell me. She's like, oh, do you remember saying this? And I'm not going to repeat what I said. But I was like, jaw hit the floor. I was like, absolutely no way. And it's like people telling you things that you did that you had no idea about. Oh my God, it's so rattling.
But it kind of links back into drink spiking and stuff as well, in the essence of when you black out and when you can't remember anything, you start trying to fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
Okay? And if you're like a chronic overthinker normally and you suffer really badly with intrusive thoughts, you are going to be living in hell
Guilty.
for like the next few weeks.
Yep.
You're going to think you murdered someone or killed someone, or that
Yeah.
you... I sometimes convince myself I drunk drove home,
Yeah.
even though I don't have access to a car.
Yeah.
And it's just terrible, and it's just insufferable. So it kind of links back to the question of culture and why do we punish ourselves
because
like
it all
that?
kind of cycles in,
It all,
right?
yeah. And I think another thing is like if you're going to an event, like a way to avoid some anxiety, and if you're feeling anxious about the event, maybe don't drink as much as you were planning to. Maybe just cut it back a little bit or go sober. So then that like minimizes the anxiety you'll feel the next day.
A good trick I always found is if you're drinking bottles, people can see how much you have left in your bottle. Hide your box, get cans, hide your box, just hang on to one.
Yep.
And then if people go, is that the same one? You just be like, no,
Yeah,
I've
exactly.
been drinking heaps, yeah.
I'm
Also,
on 8.
Yeah, exactly. And also eating a big meal, making sure on the day you're drinking, eating regularly. And even if you don't want to, forcing yourself to, because that makes all the difference of how much you're going to remember, how much you can regulate yourself, and how reasonable you're going to behave.
And water. Stopping for a water break.
It's never bad stopping for a bit of water. You feel like another drink, just have a water first.
Have a
It could
water
make
first.
all the difference to how your week's going to go.
And if your night's chaotic and you can tell you're saying some things maybe you shouldn't be saying, or if you notice your friends doing some crazy things, maybe reel them in a little bit so that it helps with their anxiety the next day.
Yeah, I know the entertainment can be good, but it's sometimes better to just rein them in a little bit.
Yeah. It's important.
Yeah.
And also in terms of drinking, and binge drinking as well, you don't have to get schmonkered. You don't have to get wasted, and there's no harm in leaving early. And if the way that you know that you have to prevent yourself from getting schmonkered is by leaving, then do it. Always an Irish ditch can always be a
So
trick if
good.
you hate peer pressure.
The Clara special.
Yeah, the
That
Clara
is
special.
Oh, Clara is bad for it.
I'm popping out to the toilet. Actually, I booked
I
an
booked
Uber.
an Uber.
And I'm going home
Yeah.
and I'm going to eat McDonald's and watch a wee rom-com.
Yeah. Always book the Uber before saying goodbye to anyone, so then no one can convince you to stay.
No. 'cause it's on the way.
Another thing to reach out about in terms of anxiety and, binge drinking in our culture as well is if you notice your drinking is making you behave erratically or you're experiencing suicidal thoughts and any issues around that, it may be a good time to talk to a counsellor or your GP, because alcoholism and being an alcoholic is something that is genetic and can happen to you very easily.
And when you go to the doctors and they say, how much do you drink? And I go, oh, like not really much at all.
Yeah.
Like I'll probably drink like on the weekends, have like a box or something. And they're like, that you're counted as an alcoholic. Like I think to a doctor, I think over drinking is more than 6 drinks in a week or 4 drinks in a week, something really, really small. And I went in like, oh, I don't really drink, like every second weekend or have like a box or something. And they were like, no, that's drinking. Like that's bad. And I'm like, imagine the people. Or like the fact that we celebrate Crate Day. I love Crate Day. I can put my hand up and say I love Crate Day.
My favourite holiday.
Yeah. I was about to say, you ask any Kiwi, the
Yeah.
favourite holiday is Crate Day.
Yeah.
The fact that we sit down and see race our friends, how fast we can finish a crate of beer is like the wildest thing.
Yeah.
So bad. It's just so, and I think it's fun and games. Those people who walk around and they don't experience anxiety, they're really fun to drink with and they behave, normally. We also, with years of drinking, have met people who begin behaving violently or erratically or run their mouths heaps, and it becomes a problem. And I think if you're getting anxiety, but you're getting anxiety because you have said and done things that are not good, then it may be time to consider hanging up the old long white and, maybe going for runs instead and sorting it out. Because I know it's hard, but you're going to live your life in absolute hell if you keep living like this.
And it's so hard to realize you're an alcoholic you don't even have to be an alcoholic, but like excessively drinking, because drinking is so big in New Zealand and everybody drinks a lot of alcohol. Maybe you don't need as much to still be in a bad place, but you are in yourself.
Yep.
Like maybe you do only need 8 drinks. 8 drinks. 8 drinks to be pissed every weekend, but you're doing it every weekend and you're getting smashed, but you're like, in my head, I'm only drinking 8 drinks. Like I'm still not. But if it's a problem for you in your life and it's affecting you through the week, then it is a problem.
Yeah.
And it's something to like think about, talk to your mates about, maybe think of a different activity to do on the weekends.
Yeah. It's so hard with the peer pressure in New Zealand, but you can get through it.
And I think a main message as well is like, look after your mates. Like if you notice that they're maybe looking forward to the weekend a little bit too much, look out for them. Also, like if they are making a dick of themselves, maybe try and reel them in a little bit. Go out in groups,
That's such a Kiwi thing, looking forward to the weekend. I get so mad when everyone's like, it's Monday and they're like, 5 days till the weekend. If you are living your entire life, I understand working a 9 to 5 can be dry, Monday to Friday, but if you're only living your life for the weekends, like there's a problem there, because you're missing out on 5 days of 7 of your life every single week where you just work and sleep. And
Especially if you have really bad hangxiety and hangovers and it lasts up until Tuesday. You know what I mean? Like is it worth it? Like,
yeah.
And
living for
another
the
way
weekend.
as well to like negate it with your friends is if you do notice one of your friends struggling, to be a good friend is to sit down with them, ask them why they're doing this excessively, and also offering solutions such as, you know, I won't drink with you this weekend. We can go sober together. We can go for walks together. It's not very helpful if you're like, oh, you need to stop drinking. By the way, I'm going out all weekend, but you should come.
I'm gonna get boxed.
Definitely respect your friends' choices. If they're saying they don't want to drink, respect that and just like, join in with them and don't go sober too.
Well,
Yeah.
we've covered some good ground.
We are covering.
Was that English? What did you say?
We're covering some good
Oh,
ground.
oh,
We're covering
covering
some
some
great
ground.
ground.
One cool thing is to make sure you check out our giveaways on the socials.
Yep.
Oh, they're good. Debrief.nz. We're
Yes.
giving away Hundy Bills to celebrate all chats about drinking.
Exactly. And
A
also,
celebration.
we have a website.
Yeah, we do.
Debrief.media. We have so many cool quizzes.
We write articles.
I think we've got a fun quiz up on what alcoholic drink you are at the
you?
moment as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And also there's articles with really like helpful resources if you want to know anything about what we've talked about today more in depth. Research.
Yeah, we do more deep dives on the articles. So check them out.
Check them out. But thank you for joining us for episode 3 of the Debrief. Debrief.
It is
Sorry, I
the
missed it.
debrief, but it's debrief.
It's a debrief.
Come on now.
We're having a debrief. We appreciate your support. Thank you for listening the whole way through, and we look forward to seeing you next week.